Our state is at the crossroads of advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and agricultural innovation, making it a powerful example of how the bioeconomy can thrive when research, industry, and workforce development come together. From world-class institutions to a highly skilled workforce, a strong network of entrepreneurs, and access to private capital, innovators across Indiana are driving breakthroughs that not only support local economies, but also strengthen our national competitiveness. As chair of the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology, I've seen firsthand how critical biotechnology is, not only to our economic growth, but to our national security. The ability to innovate and scale biotechnology here at home will shape our competitiveness, resilience, and security for decades to come. Congress has already taken important steps to reinforce this leadership through the CHIPS and Science Act, which made historic investments in domestic research, development, and manufacturing. While much of that focus has been on semiconductors, the law underscores a broader commitment to strengthening America's innovation ecosystem, one that must fully include biotechnology and the small businesses driving it forward. Today's hearing will explore how small businesses power innovation and help position the United States as a global leader in biotechnology. Small businesses are often the engines of discovery, moving quickly, taking risks, and transforming cutting-edge research into real-world applications. They play a critical role in translating ideas from the lab to the marketplace, creating jobs, and fostering economic growth in communities across the country. At the same time, these businesses face unique and persistent challenges, including limited access to capital, complex and sometimes burdensome regulatory frameworks, and difficulties in attracting and retaining a highly skilled workforce. Addressing these barriers is essential if we want to unlock the potential of America's bioeconomy. This hearing will examine how partnerships between small businesses, research institutions, and government can accelerate innovation and ensure that breakthroughs are not only developed, but scaled here at home. Federal programs must be not only responsive, but proactive in empowering the next generation of biotech entrepreneurs. Strengthening the bioeconomy is not just about scientific advancement, but maintaining America's leadership on the world stage. As global competition intensifies, it's critical that we continue to invest in innovators who are driving this sector forward. So I look forward to productive discussions today and to hearing directly from our witnesses about the opportunities and challenges they see on the ground. Thank you for your time, your expertise, and your commitment to advancing American innovation. The hearing today will feature two panels. The first comprised of industry leaders, followed by a second panel with commercialization experts. With that, we'll now proceed to our first panel. I want to extend a warm welcome to all of our witnesses. I'm thankful that you took time out of your busy schedules to participate today and share your expertise on the role of small business in America's biotech ecosystem. We'll start with Dr. Alina Alexiyenko, co-founder and president of LioWave, and the Riley Professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics and Chemical Engineering at Purdue University. LioWave is an SBIR grantee for innovative microwave heating technologies developed at Purdue. Next, we have Aaron Schott. Mr. Schott is CEO and board director of BiomeEdit, an animal health company specializing in microbiome innovation. He's also a board member of the Purdue Research Foundation and the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute. Next, Mr. Derek Small is the co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Monument Biosciences. He's also managing director of Luson BioVentures, as well as the CEO of Senadio Biosciences. Monument is bringing forward the next generation of Alzheimer's drugs. And our last witness on this first panel is Mr. Mark Warner. He is co-founder and CTO of Liberation Bioindustries, which is building a global network of precision fermentation facilities to produce bio-based consumers' products at scale. So I ask unanimous consent that the witness's full statements be included in the record without objection, so ordered. And as your written testimony has been made part of the record, the committee asks that each of you limit your oral remarks to 5 minutes. With that, Dr. Alexeyenko, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Young, distinguished guests. I really appreciate the opportunity to testify today. So I'm here on behalf of LioWave, a West Lafayette, Indiana startup that's based on innovations developed at Purdue University. LioWave was was incorporated in 2023 to solve one of the major bottlenecks in biomanufacturing, and that's lyophilization. Also known as freeze drying, it's a process that happens in a space-like vacuum. It is one of the critical processes to stabilize complex biologic molecules so that they can be stored, transported, and delivered to patients safely. I know some of the companies actually using this technology. Lyophilization is a workhorse of biotechnology. We're not just developing a faster workhorse, we are aiming to replace it with an all-terrain vehicle that can deliver novel and legacy biotech products to market safely and at scale. The history of lyophilization underpins the the story, the origin of American leadership in biotechnology. It actually starts about 85 years ago in spring 1941, several months prior to the United States' entry into World War II. US Army and Navy launched a massive public-private partnership effort to supply freeze-dried blood plasma to the battlefields in Europe. It was later named one of the foremost lifesavers of Allied soldiers in Europe, and one of the key medical armaments for Allies' victory. And that capacity to freeze-dry blood plasma during World War II was actually essential for manufacturing of the first antibiotic, penicillin, that saved millions of lives around the world. And that fermentation capacity, as well as human expertise, developed for first antibiotics, has secured America's leadership in biotechnology when it emerged in the 1970s. We're again at an inflection point. There is an urgency to innovate. Lyophilization today, taking this manufacturing unit process operation as an example, is a critical step to manufacture recombinant protein drugs that are used for, say, heart attacks and autoimmune diseases, targeted therapies for cancer, vaccines, gene therapies, microbiome products, to name a few, diagnostic reagents. Majority of essential antibiotics on the essential medicine list are manufactured in a lyophilized form. Yet the process itself remains very slow and energy inefficient, and one of the most expensive steps in biomanufacturing. So in 2015, through NIST Advanced Manufacturing Technology Consortium program, Purdue and partners established LioHub, an industry university consortium that developed first technology roadmap for lyophilization. And one of those technologies, potential innovations that we identified and pursued with the team was to use a disruptive technology based on radio frequency semiconductor, use microwave heating to speed up lyophilization. With early support from the university through PRF Trust Fund and a competitively awarded grant from Nimble, partnering with Merck and EmaLife, we developed a prototype of this technology and were able to test drive it on real biologics supplied by Merck. This partnership was transformative. It allowed us to move from lab-based invention to company creation. And in 2024, LioWave was able to raise our first venture capital round, and license that allowed us to pay for the license, IP license from Purdue, and create our first jobs here in Indiana. Through SBIR Phase 1 grant awarded in 2025, we were able to expand the team's expertise, especially in mechanical engineering and software engineering, and delivered our first microwave turbo dry system to a customer on US East Coast. This lab scale prototype, the first lab scale prototype, would hardly fit in a minivan. Our first product actually can fit into a carry-on and delivered and installed in less than an hour, while increasing manufacturing capacity. So we're now in a steep climb to transition this innovation into GMP-regulated manufacturing. And there are many other possible innovations that can bolster US leadership in biomanufacturing. Based on this experience, I want to suggest these three recommendations. First, continue strengthen existing programs like SBIR, STTR, and motivate small business participation in programs on end-to-end reshoring of end-to-end manufacturing to US of critical medicines. And biologics, such as those by Asper. Second, provide incentives to help offset regulatory costs. Incentives to adopt these advanced manufacturing technologies. One specific recent example is Advanced Manufacturing Technology Designation Program by FDA, which is the first step in the right direction. And third, establish a national network of regional shared use facilities that are available to innovators that provide GMP-relevant equipment and environments to test drive these new technologies. Those facilities would function as speedways for innovation in American innovation and biotech manufacturing. With these partnerships, with the right partnerships, policies, and support for growing businesses, I believe we can fuel America's bioeconomy for generations to come. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mr. Schott, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Young, for distinguished guests for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Aaron Schott. I'm the CEO of BioMedit. We're a biotechnology company based here in Indiana, and we develop synthetic biology solutions using engineered microbes to address challenges in animal health, animal agriculture, and increasingly areas that we believe are relevant to human health. I'd like to focus my remarks on 3 main points. First, the opportunity in animal health. Second, the structural friction that limits innovation for small companies in this sector. And third, why this matters in the context of national interest. First, the opportunity. Animal health is often treated as a secondary market relative to human biotechnology. It's understandable. In practice, it plays much more of a strategic role. It sits at the intersection of food security, public health, environmental sustainability, and biological innovation. At BioMedit, we're developing a product to address an infectious disease in poultry using an engineered microbe that delivers targeted proteins to the gastrointestinal tract, thereby protecting these birds from this disease in a non-antibiotic platform. But the important point is not the individual product, it's the platform and the approach. Small companies in animal health are working to test new and novel biological delivery systems. We're validating these mechanisms and technologies in real-world environments, and we're generating data at very meaningful scale. In doing so, we often represent the opportunity to de-risk technologies that can later be applied in human health, and we do so at a quicker pace and a lower cost. This creates a natural bridge between agricultural innovation and biomedical innovation, one that is currently, I believe, under-leveraged. Second, the friction. Despite this opportunity, animal health innovation is structurally undercapitalized. Compared to human biotechnology, capital is more limited, investor familiarity is lower, and pathways to scale are well less pioneered and defined. The result is straightforward. Fewer entrepreneurs build in this space, fewer ideas as a result are pursued, and technologies are often pushed prematurely into human applications. This is not a science problem, it's an ecosystem problem. Small companies are doing this work with constrained capital, limited infrastructure, and pathways that are not always optimized for novel approaches. The consequence is not simply slower progress, it's missed innovation. Third, why this matters. The U.S. protein supply is a foundational component of national stability. It is exposed to disease threats like avian influenza and African swine fever, and potentially deliberate disruption through biological means from malicious actors. Animals also serve as sentinel species in zoonotic reservoirs, meaning challenges in animal health can quickly become challenges or solutions in human health. In this context, innovation in animal health is directly tied to the resilience of our food system, continuity of supply of food, and national preparedness as it relates to infectious disease. Small biotechnology companies are often where the most novel solutions originate and progress most rapidly. The question is not whether innovation will occur, it is whether it will occur fast enough, at appropriate scale, and within the United States. Finally, one additional perspective on the role of animals in research. Historically, animals have primarily served as models for human biology. We now have the opportunity to evolve this model. By investing directly in animal health innovation, we can develop therapies that benefit animals, improve animal welfare, and generate insights that translate into human medicine. In that sense, animals are not only participants in research, but they can also be recipients of its benefits. In closing, the bioeconomy is being built today, often by small companies operating at the edge of what is technically possible. Animal health is a critical but under-recognized part of that system. With the right attention, it can strengthen our food supply, improve resilience, and accelerate progress across both animal and human health. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schott. Mr. Small, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thanks for having me here today, Senator Young, and the opportunity to testify. So in your opening, you introduced us all, and I love hearing these stories, by the way. That's really part of entrepreneurship, and the spirit of this is innovation and the challenges that we all go through. I've been doing this now for over 25 years, starting new companies, not always in biotechnology, but since 2002 or so in biotech. 10 different companies, more than 10 actually, several different products we developed along the way too, so really quite a bit of trial and error, different ideas that we advance from science into hopefully commercialized situations. As you mentioned earlier, I'm currently CEO of a company called Monument Biosciences. We are based here in Indianapolis, focused on Alzheimer's disease as a therapeutic category, but really trying to harness innovation that happens at the academic setting in university. Right now, the majority of our technology comes from Indiana University School of Medicine, another group that Aaron is a part of called the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute, and Purdue. So really, we're pulling a lot of technology from these specific universities. I've actually partnered with several universities for these companies from all over the world, really. The coast, the larger schools, and but really this ecosystem here in Indianapolis has been extraordinary for starting this company. I launched these out of my firm called Lucon BioVentures, which is really dedicated to starting new biotech companies, kind of like a venture creation as much as a venture capital company. I'm also, as part of that process of launching a company, also in brain health called Syndeo Biosciences. And that's all been a focus that I shifted over into neuroscience in 2017. As I mentioned, 2002, kind of starting my life into biotech, but 2017, a lot of things changed for me. I got to experience a lot of success, I guess, across companies in science and clinical development, but I also spent 2 years being primary care provider for my father, who died in 2017. Of a dementia-related early onset dementia. And that fueled, a thought process for me, changed how I think about venture creation and entrepreneurship to something that's a little more personal, certainly very science-rooted, and we have business fundamentals, and we have shareholders and people we are accountable to. But focusing on Alzheimer's became an important concept for me. And so I think, for us here today, biotech, as you mentioned, I think actually really well up front. It's not an ordinary small business situation. It's a different type of ecosystem. It's mostly research and development. It's a lot of innovation. I think there's some really cool stats here too, that over 80% of the transformative medicines approved by FDA through our our history of the pharmaceutical industry have come from early stage, startup company, innovative team situations, not necessarily the big pharma companies that most people think of too. So I think this is an extraordinarily important subject. One of my companies was called Norex. It was acquired, for a decent amount of capital. So there's a lot of success that can happen here if we're, mindful of innovation and what it takes to kind of achieve success in these innovative companies. That company started from an SBIR grant that we were awarded, and then probably 10 more grants that we ended up having to kind of really focus on and kind of get more access to before we were able to attract the first venture capital dollars and, ultimately almost take that company public before it was acquired. Started another company called Assembly Biosciences, which ultimately we were able to take public, and it's listed on NASDAQ today too, but also entirely initially based on NIH grants and then SBIR grants and then other grants that we were able to receive to be able to advance those projects and technologies, because there's always something, whether it's lyophilized product that we have to pay for, a microbiome, technology, which I've developed in companies too. I mean, these are things that we just all need as companies that to maintain our innovation and kind of fill this supply chain. These companies, Monument and Deo, they're the same kind of investments as those first two companies. They're at an earlier stage now too, but also actually in a little bit more advanced medical environment. We've had some approvals recently for Alzheimer's drugs that give us hope that we can be successful in what we're doing. They're not the most, successfully advanced drugs for patient benefit. They're not cures for patients, right? I mean, initially when they were approved, I wasn't even sure I would have been willing to give them to my father for his situation. Wasn't quite sure of the risk benefit. I'm more encouraged by that now too, but it really is just about innovation. It's about being able to bring forward the next therapies that we can develop. And so I've tried to be very specific too about three things that I think that, I would be interested in getting national help for. I think that they're very actionable for developing novel drugs and innovation. First is specifically the NIH funding. I think, and I'm learning more about kind of different perceptions at the national level for NIH activities and funding, but I do think it's absolutely critical. I think it sometimes gets characterized as a cost center, but it's a major investment with a huge return to society and to the field, not necessarily just to entrepreneurial companies. It's a major producer of jobs and employment, of course, too. And, it's something that I think our competitors globally, including China, have invested in significantly in a way that, I think we have to be mindful of that from our standpoint. Second is the specific SBIR and STTR. For biotech, it's a little more expensive to get to these early stage proof of concepts, especially than it was a few years ago. So I think there are some parameters of those. We work really hard to usually get our first 3 to 5 or more applications turned down, or they don't meet certain criteria. You rewrite them and you have to bring them forward and resubmit and so on too. It's a process for all of us that have written grants. But then getting them, I think the criteria for biotech is a little more expensive, so there are ceilings associated with phase 1s and phase 2. I do think raising those ceilings would be meaningful from a $300,000 limit to closer to $1 million to $3 million limit. And third is a little bit more, kind of business oriented, and it's aligning incentives, as was brought up a little bit earlier too. There's a specific tax incentive called the QSBS, Qualified Small Business Stock Tax Incentive, that I've actually, my science founders and our investors have benefited from in our companies, and that absolutely, works as a flywheel for the next investments, for the ability to, encourage additional investments in the private sector too, was a really, kind of simple code change and opportunity for for change at a national level. So, and I do think we have at Indiana a really unique position at both entrepreneurial. So I'm really glad you're having us here too. I think we are kind of a diamond in the rough, and it's rare that we really kind of toot our own horn about that. But specifically in Alzheimer's disease research, we have a unique competitive advantage at the academic level. We have, the most successful pharmaceutical company that's also getting drugs approved in Alzheimer's disease too with Eli Lilly, and an ecosystem for companies that we have sitting at this table, but also several more down that you might hear some from in the next panel too, from that are supported by BioCrossroads or IU Labs. So really a unique opportunity that I do think that, a national agenda will can make some significant progress for us here right in the state. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Small. Mr. Warner, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Senator Young and distinguished guests, my name is Mark Warner. I am co-founder and CTO of Liberation Bioindustries, a company working to bring fit-for-purpose biomanufacturing to the U.S. with our first facility under construction in Richmond. The United States leads the world in biotechnology innovation, but consistently fails to translate that leadership into domestic manufacturing. Nowhere is this more evident than in industrial biotechnology, where breakthrough processes are developed domestically, but commercialized elsewhere. It has quite simply become a system driving small business value creation outside of the U.S. My testimony argues that the Small Business Administration is uniquely positioned to address this gap. Industrial biotechnology is overwhelmingly driven by small businesses, yet commercialization requires capital-intensive infrastructure that falls outside the traditional SBA support framework. Where currently there is no bankable support, public or private, for first-of-a-kind facilities. By adapting its programs to support first-of-a-kind manufacturing in biotechnology, the SBA can play a decisive role in converting innovation into operating assets, strengthening U.S. competitiveness and industrial resilience. Industrial biotechnology is often perceived as a large-scale industry, but its innovation base is overwhelmingly composed of small businesses. The companies developing fermentation processes, synthetic biology platforms, and bio-based production pathways typically that have fewer than 1 to 200 employees and are pre-profit and capital constrained. They are small businesses attempting to build entirely new manufacturing systems. Development pathway is consistent. Small companies innovate, develop pilot processes, then attempt to build their own commercial facility. At that moment, capital requirements increase dramatically, but the companies themselves remain small. This creates a structural mismatch. Small businesses are responsible for building large industrial assets without access to financing tools for the transition. Primary barrier in industrial biotechnology is not scientific, it's commercialization. The U.S. government support reinforces the outcome. We fund innovation that ends up getting scaled overseas. Capital requirements scale rapidly from tens of millions to hundreds of millions. Companies become too large for venture funding, yet remain too risky for traditional project finance. This creates a persistent financing gap at the point of greatest leverage. Scale currently happens in Europe, China, and Asia, not because they're more innovative than the U.S., because they simply fund infrastructure better. This results in U.S. dollars going into foreign manufacturing, and when first plants are built overseas, we export the learning curve and future innovation. Industrial biotechnology aligns directly with SBA's core mission. The sector is driven by small, innovative, capital-constrained companies attempting to grow to scale. However, unlike traditional small businesses, success requires building manufacturing infrastructure rather than expanding service or incremental operation. It's just simply a different support model. The SBA is uniquely positioned to bridge this gap by supporting the transition from technology development to asset ownership. This is the precise point when small businesses either scale into industrial players or fail to commercialize entirely. The three recommendations we can offer are: one, to expand loan guarantees for first-of-a-kind biotech facilities; two, create a biotechnology commercialization track; and three, support shared infrastructure. In conclusion, industrial biotechnology represents critical opportunity for the United States, but only if the innovation translates into domestic manufacturing. The companies driving this transformation are small businesses. The infrastructure they require is not. Bridging the gap is where the SBA can have an outsized impact. If the United States is serious about maintaining leadership in biotechnology, it must support not just the invention, but the ability to build. The SBA can and should be a central part of this solution. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark, and thanks to all of our witnesses for not only your thoughtful testimony, but for your recommendations. You'll be encouraged to know, before I proceed to questions, I'd like to emphasize that the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology spent 2 years studying, among other challenges, some of the challenges each of you have articulated. A number of the recommendations you have put forward have been included, or variants thereof, in our recommendations to Congress, but not all of them. So you should be encouraged by that as well. We continue to formulate new policy ideas, working with other stakeholders, and that's a good launching off point to begin with questions, and I'll begin with you, Dr. Alexeyenko. Each of you discussed the SBIR and STTR program and its importance to you, including to the LioWave company that you have co-founded. LioWave received, according to my notes, a Phase 1 SBIR grant award. And so I want to know, Doctor, how can federal programs like SBIR and STTR better support early-stage biotech companies in overcoming the valley of death that's often characterized as one of the biggest barriers to commercialization in this industry? I think I've heard greater resourcing to recipients is important in certain instances. Maybe adopting a tiered structure, as Mr. Small indicated. So treating biotech differently, knowing that it takes oftentimes more resources to ultimately commercialize products. So I'll leave it to you, and you can run wherever you like to with this question, Doctor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Senator Young. This is a great question, and something we've been thinking and living for the past year. Our SBIR Phase 1 award started March 1st, 2025, and we just submitted our final report for this 12 months Phase 1. And I've been thinking with our team. So what it allowed us to do? It allowed us to bring our first product to customer much, much faster. We were able to hire our first non-founder employee, Stephen actually is here, retain great talent to Indiana. And we were able to, for example, pay for the software licenses and speed up the design of our systems and build it much faster. I also want to say that here in Indiana, we have the best deal on SBIR. Seriously, one of the best deals. Because I think through IEDC, Applied Research Institute handles actually cost share to SBIR, and they awarded us an additional $50,000 that allowed us to do, for example, to pay for some of the equipment that's otherwise not allowed on SBIR grants, so that we can buy instrumentation to develop our hardware faster.
Can I interject, Doctor? So with that additional $50,000, would that accrue to the company and pay for investments, or is that part of the application process and therefore it receives more favorable weighting because it would be $50,000 less of federal dollars that would have to go to a worthy recipient?
In the time that we submitted the application,
Yes.
that was not part of the application.
I see.
This was a great addition. After we got awarded, we became eligible for the supplement, meeting some of the other requirements for being an innovative business based in Indiana, and actually making a commitment to stay in Indiana and grow in Indiana. So that was an additional $50,000 that allows more freedom, actually, of how to spend these resources to develop products and to perform research. And so that was very important. I also want to mention some of the venture capital incentive, venture capital investment incentives that exist only in Indiana too. And that's in addition to what was mentioned before by Mr. Small, there is a VCI incentive in Indiana that allows, actually, investors get the best deal by investing in companies in Indiana.
So Mr. Small, because you're a reference, because you had some thoughtful suggestions as it relates to this topic, I'm going to pivot to you and see if you have any additions to make in terms of thoughts about how we could optimize the SBIR, STTR program. But also, you've offered a recommendation related to the qualified small business tax incentives that I'd never received before in a couple of years of working on this. So if you could unpack that a little bit more and explain how that works from an investor standpoint.
Yeah, well, I would have to have my CFO come up and give all the specific code details of what happens, but
for a lay person.
Yeah, for me it's an interesting incentive, I thought, actually, and I didn't know about it until my financial advisor figured it out and kind of told our whole community about this, and now we've figured this out. So since it's a holding period associated with founders' shares of stock, so early investors, so people who hold common shares or make investments, equity investments in companies, and they hold that for at least 5 years. And then after 5 years, that's treated with a tax incentive. I forget the full incentive, but it's a significant, up to $10 million investment. But it's also like a percentage that you do not pay ordinary income tax associated with that. So it ends up savings for large transactions. It saves several $1 million, and that goes to those investors, and it can apply to investors as well as the founders or science founders too, for these companies. Which in biotech, again, for everything we talked about, that how much more capital is required. I think those supplemental grants that Dr. Alenko is mentioning are really in that same kind of concept. It is more expensive, and so there's like finding ways to make supplements and what have you too. But specifically, this tax incentive allowed all of the investors to do better for companies.
Yes.
As part of their early investment and their willingness to kind of hold longer too, because biotech takes longer. And then that has allowed us, then they make a little bit more money, and then we rinse and repeat. We start another company, they have more investors.
So we're going to chase this down, and we'll let you know what direction we go with it and why. Mr. Schott, I'm so glad you're here because you bring a unique perspective to this conversation with the animal health focus. You mentioned in your testimony that the animal health innovation market differs structurally from human biotech. Can you elaborate on how advances in animal health can translate into insights for human medicine and strengthen the broader scientific ecosystem? If you have any compelling examples,
yeah,
welcome
sure.
them.
No, great question. In fact, many, as you know, in human biomedical research, animals are often used as testing systems to evaluate whether or not something is safe or whether something is efficacious. And in many cases, what we do on the human pharma side, I spent the first 25 years of my career at Lilly in human pharma, is we create sort of artificial versions of a disease that afflicts humans in an animal. It's called an animal model, and we test our drugs early to give us confidence that the biological approach we're taking is mechanistically relevant to treating disease. And the sad part about that is these are purpose-bred animals, so that's good. They're purpose-bred for this purpose, but at the same time, all of the insights that get generated really accrue to human biomedical innovation and no benefit befalls those dogs or cats or that might actually be part of that process. So an example I could provide very specifically that is a biomed focus is we engineer bacteria to deliver biomolecules to the gut. And our lead product is focused on broiler chickens and knocking down the disease burden caused by an infectious pathogen that produces toxins in the gut of the chicken that make the chicken sick. The name of that pathogen is Clostridium perfringens. There's another Clostridium species that affects humans called Clostridium difficile. And if you know anything about this, this is a disease that often plagues mature adults and causes really serious disease in the gut. The mechanism that we pioneered at Biomed for chickens could be leveraged identically in humans for the same approach. Our product will be approved by the USDA later this year, and it's the first product of its kind. We've created a path for an engineered biological therapeutic to be approved by a regulatory agency in a species and in a geography, and that will be the first time that has occurred. But it opens the door for people looking at the application in humans as less risky now because we've proven it in animals.
It's very helpful, and I would say this is among the topics. Businesses like yours are among those that we consulted with as we formulated our various recommendations. One of the primary recommendations, in fact, that the Commission developed was to put someone in charge within the White House from a regulatory standpoint so we can see across different agencies and serve as a sort of traffic cop. It's not uncommon for entrepreneurs, investors to have to deal with 3 different regulatory agencies when they're getting off the ground, slowing things down: FDA, USDA, EPA. And that significantly leads to all sorts of confusion and delay and therefore causes our investors to burn capital. So that rhymes with some of your insights. Mr. Small, given your experience launching several companies, which you mentioned, what do you see as the most critical factor, if you had to distill it down, in helping early stage discoveries successfully develop ultimately into marketable products?
Yeah, I think it's been said a couple of times that it's probably not scientific, it's financial, it's business, and I think a lot of these things of incentive, alignment, and kind of bridging the gap, or this valley of death type of thing, I think is a common theme. That I think it's not as huge of a chasm as I think people think it is. I think there are small investments at early stages and risk-taking to kind of cross a certain threshold that become kind of like this activation energy threshold that we always seem to be just below. But the expectations that so far is like, well, we can't, that's not something we can address necessarily. So I think there is an activation energy capital at an early stage that could be meaningfully impactful to making all of these companies more successful.
Thank you. Mr. Warner, you were paraphrased right there. You indicated the primary barrier for success and for small biotech businesses isn't science, but commercialization. With that in mind, in your view, what are the biggest financing gaps today, particularly as a first-of-a-kind facility, at that first-of-a-kind facility stage that is so important to your business, which I have visited out in the field and seen how capital intensive it is, and what specific tools are needed to ensure that U.S.-funded innovation is scaled here rather than overseas?
Thank you. The main key is really, I would say, getting a legislative process that really emphasizes manufacturing. We talk about manufacturing, but when we look at technologies like chips, solar power, nuclear power, and rare earths, all of which were developed here, manufactured initially, and have moved overseas because the manufacturing moved overseas. I literally started 40 years ago with a company called Rhone-Poulenc. We were the last rare earth manufacturer in Freeport, Texas. The process that's being used in China today is the process they had because we didn't want to manufacture it anymore. When I see what's happening in biotech, I see that happening. Most of the technologies we're competing with are from overseas. So I don't want to get misconstrued. We need the development dollars, but as a country, we've gotten in a bad habit of when we don't manufacture. And the biggest concept is when manufacturing moves overseas, technology leadership moves overseas. When I graduated in the late 1980s, we had chip expertise. Half of my class went to Intel and things. Then in the 90s, they were pushed to move to Korea and Japan. So that's the biggest thing is it's not, and this is great for Indiana because Indiana gets manufacturing. That's why we're here. I guess I would say the broader US could learn some from that.
So if we want, stated differently, if we want supply chain resiliency, we need to invest in it.
Correct.
And if we want a talented workforce that innovates in the manufacturing context through an iterative process, that takes time to reconstitute. It can't happen all at once. So
Correct.
We're going to have sustained policy support for this approach.
Correct. And if I could just add, and I'll give you a quick example. We had a USDA loan guarantee for $25 million. There were a lot of reasons in 2 years we couldn't convert that into actual money. And it was structural. The program was built 25 years ago. And think about it, our facility is $115 million. A $25 million loan is like getting a 20% loan on your house. It's just too small. They weren't envisioned to match, there's no program to match the infrastructure we all need, be it USDA, DOE, and that's what I think needs to be looked at. If we want to manufacture biotech in the US, what does that look like? And most of the programs we're looking at are 20, 30 years old. They weren't designed for the technologies we're trying to commercialize.
I agree. You put it very well in your written testimony as well. So this question will be directed at the entire panel, starting with Dr. Alexeyenko and moving down the line. What are the biggest regulatory bottlenecks your company has faced in moving from discovery to clinical development, and how can Congress help streamline that pathway for other small firms? Try and be very brief here, please.
Yeah, actually the regulatory barriers are probably the largest. We can innovate other things, but it's very important to produce safe and efficacious medicines, both for human and animal health. And basically, we're constantly being asked, what will FDA think about this technology? And interestingly, when let's take FDA example. When the innovation in manufacturing mostly happens when there is a new drug product or biologic product. And the newest advanced manufacturing technology designation is the first pathway within FDA to approve manufacturing technologies rather than approving new medicines. So that new manufacturing can be applied without the clinical trial burden of developing new medicines. It would be just focused on manufacturing. So this is one of the biggest issues is that biotech manufacturing is linked to biotech products.
Yes.
And the regulatory barrier to innovate in manufacturing is almost as high as innovating in a new product, because either you have to attach to a new product, or you have to find at least 3 products that are existing approved products.
And you feel like the biomanufacturing regulations could be streamlined?
They can definitely be streamlined, and very important, the regulatory costs are very high. The timelines are, it's the opportunity cost of using GMP equipment to test the new technology is very high.
Okay. Mr. Schott?
Yeah, so I would say the regulatory agency I have the most experience with in this context is the USDA. There was not a regulatory path for the kind of technology that we're bringing forward, and I've actually been pleasantly surprised. And I think it's the case of having a reviewer who has a background in the technology is a much greater advantage than having a reviewer who doesn't have any experience with your technology, and not everybody who sort of walks up to the agency can benefit from that kind of fit. We've been lucky in that regard. I think one other, and so what I'll talk about are things that make it work as opposed to barriers, because they have resolved some barriers. And so better fit or greater spread of competency of reviewers across the emerging biotechnology space would be good. A second item is our technology is a genetically engineered microorganism, and there needs to be adjudication of that as being safe for the environment, safe for humans, safe for animals. And the historical process for getting something like that approved is very lengthy and indeterminate. It's a black box. You submit to the Federal Register, there's a public comment period, and you wait for some sort of synthesis of that, and this could be months and even years. We benefited this year or last year because the USDA decided that they could use the Federal Register process at their discretion and make that risk determination internal to the agency, which facilitated our receipt of authorization of our technology to move into the environment, testing in the environment. And so those are the kinds of regulatory reforms that actually work and work well.
So was this a novel interpretation by the USDA?
I think it was a cumulative analysis that indicated that they very seldom get input from the public domain through that Federal Register process that resulted in any other perspective than the one they already took on the product. And they're much closer to the product concept directly, technically. Yes. And so in essence, what they found is we were soliciting input from sources that weren't providing meaningful input relative to the determination of the risk assessment.
Thank you. Mr. Small, anything else to add on this front, sir?
Well, I mean, mine is definitely focusing mostly on FDA for the human product development. And yeah, I wrote down the expertise point too, because that is always something. There's always somebody in the reviewing process that's junior or maybe not quite, shouldn't have that job yet, that's reading, highly technical, NMR spectra that are, misinterpreted, which we've had happen on multiple products that we've developed. So expertise is one, but the examples at actually, internationally. So Australia, we go to Australia sometimes for running first clinical trials because these standards are a little bit lower. They're not, they're not unsafe, but they're lower, and they give us an opportunity to test those in clinics sooner.
We've of course looked at China. Yep. For the public to know, we don't aim to adopt China's morals and ethics as it relates to this, but they're fast, as are the Australians. We've looked at the Australians in terms of identifying how we might.
I've been to both
incorporate improvements,
both places, and run clinical trials in both places and the United States. We always prefer to be in the United States, and there's so they have to have huge cost and time savings for us to justify being over there for sure.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Warner?
The only comment, in the manufacturing side, we don't make GMP, we're industrial. So I would say actually we face very little regulatory burden. The best news is most of the programs the federal government delegates, Indiana's fully authorized on most of the programs. They understand manufacturing. Yes. So this is one where we're in good shape.
Don't make eye contact, the next question I was going to ask, I think it's been covered in various ways, but if any of you feel like you'd like to add something here, what unique advantages do small businesses really have to offer as it relates to our biotech ecosystem? I found very interesting, Mr. Small, your citation of 80% of the drugs that FDA has approved have come from startups or small enterprises. So that alone is really compelling to me. But does anyone else want to put in a plug for small business?
Yeah, having lived in both worlds, 25 years at Lilly in R&D, and now 6 years at Elanco, and now 5 years as a biotech entrepreneur, I would say that the problem-solving capacity and agility of a small company is unrivaled. That doesn't mean it can't be emulated in large companies, and there are many large companies that are trying to sort of reinvent themselves to allow for that. But the structural overhead and the bureaucratic component to managing a large organization sometimes gets in the way of doing the next thing, the next smartest thing, the fastest. So I think small companies can only operate that way, and that creates advantage provided they have the resources necessary to solve the problems that they're facing.
Thank you. The last topic I'm going to ask if any of you have additional comments to make in response to is I'm just throwing out supply chain resiliency as something I'd like to foot stomp here today because it's been the focus of so much of my work. I explain to people if they want a short encapsulation of things my office is working on right now. Chips, ships, rocks, genes, and sometimes I throw in quantum. But chips, semiconductors, ships, rocks, critical minerals, genes, biotech, quantum self-explanatory. But if you don't have access to a certain number of the key inputs, then you're going to be vulnerable to disruption, and that's an economic and national security issue. So any other comments as we think about this? I thought you might have one,
If
Mr.
I
Warner.
could. The program we saw that we thought was one of the best for what we needed, there was a supply chain program that came out of COVID. It was specific to animal proteins and things for the meat industry, but it applied to us. The money ended up getting pulled because it was COVID related and retracted. But we think that for the areas the U.S. struggles historically on supply chains, we think that's a very good match. And it's to some degree, I won't say not sexy, not interesting, but it's what keeps manufacturing going. And we do think that general supply chain resiliency should be a key driver of a lot of these. And I think you'll find biotech can support a lot of that.
Here's another example in the food production environment. So the majority of vitamins as micronutrients for animal feed, for animal protein production, come from China. The manufacturing base has moved over the decades to China, and it's large synthetic manufacturing. I think there's an opportunity here in the U.S. to reshore vitamin B12 production, other essential vitamins and nutrients that are critical to animal protein production, and do it in a way that's very resilient. You could imagine that if you lost those ingredients in U.S. agriculture, you would slow down U.S. production of animal protein, and I think that's a vulnerability.
This is a great question. Thank you so much. Lyophilization is used as one of the kind of solutions to provide some supply chain resilience because it can be used to stockpile reagents, stockpile microorganisms, and store them for years and years and use them as needed, ship them, and so on. But specifically, innovation and manufacturing and whatever is, it comes down at some point to like gallium nitride components, access to even to materials is important, right? To printed circuit boards. So we looked at our supply chain for LioWave, and we work very hard to get some resilience in that. And so it's very much connected to semiconductor manufacturing, to access to even machining that's kind of somewhat flexible. Stainless steel, a lot of GMP equipment is stainless steel, and machining stainless steel components. So it's really all connected. And I think the large-scale program, it needs to be addressed, not by parts, and I think a lot of it has already been, started with CHIPS and Science Act. But yeah, it's an extremely, we can't make if we don't have the nails, we can lose the whole battle.
Yeah. Well, one of the exciting things about solving this problem is that it can provide some good paying jobs as a happy byproduct of our efforts to become more resilient, right? And especially for a state that's strong in biotech and the most manufacturing intensive state in the country. So all kinds of opportunity. I thank our witnesses very much for your testimony here today. This concludes panel 1, and we will take a short recess to switch panels, and we'll bring panel 2 forward shortly. So thanks again to our witnesses on panel 1 for your time and testimony this morning. We're in recess. Thank you. You've been called to order. We'll now proceed to our second panel. Our first witness is Mr. David Rosenberg, President and CEO of Indiana University Launch Accelerator for Biosciences. For the uninitiated, that is IU Lab. Yes. Prior to this role, Mr. Rosenberg served as Indiana's Secretary of Commerce. He was previously the COO and Chief of Staff for the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. Mr. Rosenberg holds both a bachelor's degree and a JD from the Indiana University, Bloomington. Next, Mr. Vince Wong is the President and CEO of BioCrossroads and Crossroads Health Ventures. He's also on the board of directors of the Indiana Biosciences Research Institute. He holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Notre Dame and an MBA from Northwestern University. Our third witness is Michelle Dennis, Regional Innovation Officer for Heartland Bioworks. Ms. Dennis also serves as Vice President of Regional Life Sciences Programs at ARI, Applied Research Institute. She has a bachelor's degree from Indiana University Bloomington and a master's degree from University College Dublin. I ask unanimous consent that the witnesses' full statements be included in the record. Without objection, so order. As your written testimony has been made part of the record, the committee asks that you limit your oral remarks to 5 minutes. And with that, Mr. Rosenberg, you're now recognized for 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you, Senator Young and distinguished guests. My name is David Rosenberg, the inaugural President and CEO of the Indiana University Launch Accelerator for Biosciences, better known as IU Lab. And yes, for the record, I do work for IU, the reigning college football champions. Again, that was just for the congressional record.
I've heard that.
Thank you for this hearing and for holding it here in Indiana. Where you hold a hearing like this matters. It signals something important, that America's bioeconomy won't be built by a handful of coastal hubs alone. It will be built by states like Indiana and by the small businesses doing the hard work every day. Before this role, I served as Indiana's Secretary of Commerce. For 17 months, I saw firsthand what happens when a state decides to compete for the industries that will define the next generation of American strength, the industries of the future. In 2024 alone, Indiana closed with more than $39 billion of committed capital investment, helped launch a record 482 new businesses, and Indiana ranked as the most active venture capital investor in the Great Lakes region. What was clear then, and even more so now in my current role, is that life sciences isn't just an economic sector, but is a strategic national security asset. And the small businesses driving this work will be how America competes, and it will be the only way the United States can truly win. That leadership will come from innovation, and more importantly, from the ability to start small businesses and scale them right here at home, in our universities and with our ecosystem partners like those joining me today. Indiana is where the next generation of therapeutics, diagnostics, devices, and biomanufacturing tools will be built right now. Indiana's life science sector represents a $102 billion annual footprint, 70,000 workers, average wages of $177,000. We are the radiopharmaceutical capital of the world and the reigning orthopedics capital of the world. IU Lab is our mission to further strengthen the state's economy and solidify America's global leadership. IU Lab was launched in 2024 with a $138 million Lilly Endowment grant and was part of IU's own $250 million life sciences investment. IU Lab is a first-of-its-kind academic industry initiative designed to shorten the distance between a discovery and a university lab and a product that reaches a patient, a soldier, or a market, all while training the life science and biotech leaders of the future. Even before our permanent facility opens, the model is working. We signed a $40 million agreement with Eli Lilly, IU's largest industry-sponsored research agreement in history, to expand clinical trial and clinical care access for Hoosiers and to advance Alzheimer's research. We signed a 5-year agreement with Cook Medical, and Cook already named IU as one of its first interventional MRI centers of excellence, making surgical procedures safer and less invasive for patients. And this year alone, we're supporting 34 early-stage human health companies through our incubator programming. Companies like Osseo Labs, Amplified Sciences, and Quinn AI, tackling everything from orthopedic surgery to cancer detection to drug manufacturing. They are here because our state has built an ecosystem that supports them. and they can be the next generation of companies that deliver America's innovation and economic security. IU Lab is also working to train the life science and biotech leaders of the future. We're building scalable pathways into bioscience careers, including new degree programs, industry-aligned curricula, and apprenticeship models through statewide partnerships. We're embedding education directly into innovation ecosystems so that students graduate ready to contribute on day one. And the demand is clear. Between 2022 and 2024, life science wages in Indiana grew by 61%. The sector is expanding faster than we can staff it. Deploying a highly skilled and trained workforce will be the critical element for our nation's success. And last, IU has taken the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnologies work seriously, and we greatly appreciate your work, Senator Young, leading that commission. We've already launched 8 challenge grants aligned to national priorities, from AI-driven disease modeling to sustainable biomanufacturing. And to fully compete, we need even more federal leadership and partnership opportunities. Based on what I've experienced firsthand, and I've heard from small businesses, both during my time as Secretary of Commerce and now with the IU Lab, America is leading the race, but there is much more we can still do together for innovators now and all future generations. Thank you.
Mr. Wong, you're recognized 5 minutes for your testimony.
Thank you. Senator Young, distinguished guests. My name is Vince Wong. I've served as CEO and president of BioCrossroads and Crossroads Health Splinters. BioCrossroads is the statewide industry organization to advance life sciences here in Indiana. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the efforts in Indiana to create the foundation for the formation of startups to support America's bioeconomy. In response to the clarion call to accelerate reshoring of biomanufacturing issued through your leadership of the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology, Catalyze Indiana is an initiative that aims to position Indiana as the default destination for the invention, development, and implementation of next-generation technologies to enable the reshoring and manufacturing of the supply chain for medicine and food. Building on Indiana's unique strengths, including global industry leaders like Eli Lilly, Corteva, Elanco Animal Health, and world-class research universities, including Indiana University, Purdue University, University of Notre Dame, and Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology, and the nation's highest concentration of manufacturing jobs, as you alluded to earlier. This initiative addresses critical gaps in domestic supply chain resilience for food and medicine production. Supported by a $69.4 million grant from the Lee Endowment and matching commitments from participating universities, the Catalyst Scholars Fund, spearheaded by Central Indiana Corporate Partnership and powered by its branded initiatives, BioCrossroads and AgriNovus Indiana, will enable these Indiana higher education institutes to recruit 25 to 40 world-class faculty and their respective teams over 5 years to tackle industry-informed grand challenges in key platform technology areas, including automation, analytical chemistry, new macromolecular technologies, waste separation technologies, AI, and computational medicines. Because we know that we cannot simply copy and paste the processes and operations that are presently in China and India to the United States because of economic and environmental sustainability reasons. We need to be investing in new platform technologies to enable that reshoring to happen. If successfully implemented, this Catalyze Indiana initiative will position Indiana at the forefront of national efforts to bring advanced chemistry manufacturing back to the United States to secure our supply of food and medicine. This catalytic investment will establish Indiana as a top destination for research and workforce talent, a magnet for industry manufacturing investments, and an engine for innovation in horizontal production platform technologies to ensure American leadership in advanced chemistry manufacturing across a wide range of sectors. It is a full expectation that many of the faculty recruited through the Catalyst Scholars Fund will serve as scientific and technical founders of startups that will further develop and ultimately commercialize the scholars' technologies and inventions to ensure that their research has real-world impact. BioCrossroads, amongst a spectrum of partners in Indiana's innovation ecosystem, have developed and delivered a portfolio of programming and initiatives to inspire and support startup founders in their respective journeys to develop and commercialize impactful technologies and inventions. However, A critical gap that continues to persist is the lack of venture capital funding for bioscience startups in regions such as Indiana. Despite having promising discovery and inventions born in Indiana, the overwhelming concentration of necessary capital to fuel their development and growth is found in just 3 states, Massachusetts, California, and New York. The federal government can play a role to facilitate the broader dispersion and increase access of venture capital to communities such as Indiana, which are hotbeds for innovation vital to the national economy and national security. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Ms. Dennis, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Senator Young and distinguished guests, thank you for the opportunity to provide this testimony. As Regional Innovation Officer, I lead the Heartland BioWorks Tech Hub, designated and funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce through the CHIPS and Science Act. With a focus on Indiana, the BioWorks mission is to support and grow our biotech and biomanufacturing sector. With that, I deal directly with a host of biotech and biomanufacturing companies, from startups, including those that presented at the first panel, to the global leaders that we have here at the state as well. Startups and small businesses are the primary engines of innovation in biotech, often pioneering breakthrough therapies, diagnostics, and platforms that larger entities are slower to pursue. But addressing the challenges and opportunities specific to biotech innovation that were described by you, Senator Young, in your opening remarks, as well as during the first panel, it takes an all-hands approach. And places like California and Massachusetts have shown that this works, but we need more of it. This is where federal support and programs like the Tech Hubs and BioWorks come in. For years, Indiana has been bootstrapping its biotech innovation network in a determined attempt to smooth the pathway to startup success for its innovators. Now, through BioWorks coordination and EDA funding, we are overcoming long-standing biotech innovation hurdles while growing our state's biomanufacturing sector. Heartland BioWorks was proud to represent the Hoosier State at the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnologies Biotech Across America State Symposium recently, and the message was clear. The future of biomanufacturing isn't just on the coasts. BioWorks coordinates the region's strong contract development and manufacturing organization capacities and capabilities, and our robust pilot scale lab infrastructure, and funnels U.S. innovators to these resources. By driving connections to existing, largely untapped Indiana commercialization resources, we help secure and accelerate domestic biotech startup success. We also award grants to both in-state and out-of-state biotech innovators, developing new therapeutics and biomanufacturing innovations. These companies will now scale up in Indiana because of BioWorks and the EDA support that we have. These awardees are gaining access to state-of-the-art infrastructure, technical expertise, and startup mentorship that helps accelerate commercialization timelines, reduce costs, and mitigate risk. At the same time, connecting early-stage startups with our scale-up resources creates a business pipeline for these small to mid-sized operations. It also enables CDMOs to engage with the latest biotech coming down the pipeline, allowing them to ensure their manufacturing processes are capable of keeping up with innovation. Through our coordinated approach, this infusion of federal dollars is enabling BioWorks to achieve our aggressive goal. Biotech invented in the U.S. is made in the U.S. Admittedly, we do not address all barriers to biotech startup success. The capital requirements are still overwhelmingly large. However, VC follows where there are proven nexuses of activity. By creating a legitimate innovation ecosystem in the Midwest, Indiana will no longer be a flyover state for investors. This still leaves regulatory challenges. However, this is an ideal opportunity for further federal partnership. This isn't just a case of us or other regions needing more VC activity. It's a case of multiple stakeholders rallying to make the biotech commercialization process faster, cheaper, and thus more attractive to investment. Complementary efforts by other critical Indiana life sciences entities who are testifying with me today are demonstrating that progress builds on momentum. Capitalizing on all of our work, Governor Braun recently announced an unprecedented $1 billion investment in Indiana's life sciences sector over the next 10 years. BioWorks, through our many partners across Indiana, is creating a replicable model of foundation setting that will enable biotech innovations to get out of the lab and turn into the small businesses we need. Through continued federal support, partnership, and alignment, groundbreaking discoveries can be translated into new companies, high-quality jobs, and globally competitive industries rooted in communities across the country. Recognizing the potential for federal partnership, there are already grassroots efforts underway. BioWorks is leading a working group of the biotechnology-related EDA tech hubs to share data, best practices, and exemplary programs. These regional hubs are located in the Midwest or other burgeoning regions, and thus share similar innovation challenges and opportunities. Leveraging the power of our federal programs, we are working together to support our community's biotech startups and industry and collectively maximize the impact of our programs. With further federal support, we can do so much more, thriving the nation's global dominance in biotechnology.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis, and I thank all of our witnesses for their testimony. I'm going to begin with a definitional question, Mr. Wong. In the event it comes up again. Distinguish for me chemistry and advanced chemistry manufacturing, something which is oftentimes emphasized as an area of emphasis for our state, and biotechnology. Are they synonymous? Is chemistry a larger category? Or some other option?
Sure. Thank you for the question. So yes, chemistry would be a broader definition for biotechnology. Biotechnology is often synonymous with large molecule manufacturing, peptide manufacturing, vaccine manufacturing, typically administered through injectable means. Chemistry is a more broader foundational dimension that really crosses whether it be small molecule, cell gene therapy, and large molecule manufacturing. So it's really a foundational technology that really cross-cuts through all kind of modalities of therapies, whether it be for animal or plants or humans.
Okay, it's a sort of statement that Indiana wants to not only lead in biotech, but lead in this broader category. Is that accurate? Okay, that's correct. Mr. Rosenberg, we're done with definitions, at least for the time being, but through your work at IU Lab, you've seen firsthand how our state's life sciences ecosystem can help small businesses in the biotech industry. So in your view, and informed by this experience, how can universities better translate federally funded research into successful startups? Because I have to tell you, as much as I make the broader conceptual argument for research, and I do this relentlessly, even when it's really unpopular, folks back home, they want to know that these investments are going to turn into businesses and amazing products and all the rest. And as part of your answer, maybe you can touch on any gaps that you think still exist in moving innovations from the lab into the marketplace.
No, thank you for the question, Senator Young. I think there's two things. One, it's building the culture within the university. Thanks to the direction from President Whitten and the board, IU has really focused on how do we take IU's over $1 billion research enterprise and translate that into new inventions, commercializations, industry partnerships. IU Lab is intended to be the front door between our researchers and faculty and those industry partners and startups that we can work with. I think it's building the scaffolding, the programming internally to show a researcher who's done research their entire life that there is this second act of translating their research and moving it forward. But it does take the entire enterprise. One of our goals is how can we get a researcher in School of Medicine partnered with someone from Kelley School of Business or Luddy School of Informatics to take that idea and to turn it into a business plan and to adopt AI into it to really grow it. And so I think the university, again, thanks to President Whitten's direction, is really focused on building that culture, creating those pathways for researchers to become entrepreneurs and be able to grow that. I think the second is stepping off of the university campus and engaging with the ecosystem. We have incredible partners up here today that we work with very closely. IU Health has sponsored our IU Health Incubator, IU Labs, which includes a pre-accelerator, which is managed by Generator, and then our Life Tech Accelerator, which is managed by Plug and Play and BioCrossroads. It's a unique, first of its kind program that brings the expertise of these different groups that have international networks and reach together so that we can be the human health hub to bring those companies here to develop them and work with our partners. In terms of the gap, I think Mr. Wong mentioned it well in terms of venture funding. I think venture finds good ideas, but there's more we can do to further attract them and bring them into the state. I also think in terms of graduation space for startups, whether it's IBRI or IU Health's ICBI, there's that early stage lab space. We could always use more, but there are options. It's that company that's 5 to 10 employees looking to make their next step out of kind of the innovation lab into graduation space that we could use a lot more of, especially around central Indiana, to keep more of those companies here and not let them leave the state.
Thank you for that comprehensive response. A couple of reflections I have based on your response. Number one, as much as important, and this was the predicate for my question, as important as being able to articulate to our stakeholders, our constituents, the value proposition of jobs and products is, they also want to know that the way we administratively are investing these dollars is as smart as possible. And I think artificial intelligence is going to, from everything I hear, it's going to make us far more efficient in the research lab, among other areas. And I think it's important that we communicate to our constituents how much more efficient we're becoming in discovering new life-saving, life-improving products. And that's going to be very important moving forward. I had another point, but I've lost it. I'll capture it again later. But Mr. Wong, we'll move on to you in the meanwhile. From a regional innovation perspective, what distinguishes successful biotech hubs, and what federal policies could help replicate what I will, without a measure of humility, call Indiana's model across other parts of the country? Not we should be trying to follow Boston or San Diego or San Francisco or Austin, but others should be looking to replicate what we're doing. I would welcome their efforts. What advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think what's distinctive about our ecosystem, Senator Young, that should be compelling to startups, when an asset is coming out of a lab and ultimately is protected through IP, there is a shelf life from an intellectual property protection perspective. So every day that asset is not getting to patients, it means revenue loss potential, and then also loss potential impact for patients. And so the ability to move fast, for companies to be able to move fast through the entire value chain, I think is really important. I think what Indiana has is quite a unique value proposition in that respect. There's certainly very strong invention happening here, and Derek and Aaron spoke about that earlier in the prior panel about some of the great invention happening here. But also Indiana also has great manufacturing and also supply chain as well. So to have a fully integrated value chain here within central Indiana gives us, I think, competitive advantage for companies that want to move fast and move assets through the entire value chain quickly. I think also what distinguishes our ecosystem from others like Boston and San Diego is, we are highly collaborative. I think, all three of our organizations
which is related to your previous point, right?
That also enables.
If you want every spot along the value chain to be on a real-time basis to be buttoned up, it takes constant collaboration. Is that accurate?
That's right. I think there's the level of collaboration between universities and industry, between philanthropy and government and industry. It's, I've gotten exposure to other ecosystems, won't name them, but they're quite dysfunctional, I would say, and they struggle to be able to really get off the dime and work together. And I think I feel very fortunate to be working in a collaborative environment that is Indiana in that respect.
Could you name those other ecosystems, Mr. Wong?
They'll remain anonymous.
All right. I tried.
Ms. Dennis, turning to you, how can public-private partnerships and federal investments be designed to strengthen domestic biomanufacturing capacity, something we're focused on real time, you're focused on real time at Heartland, and thereby reduce U.S. reliance on foreign supply chains?
I think it's through two approaches. I think that we would first value or benefit from federal coordination of just inventorying what we have and where it is and where the strengths are, the key capabilities are, and then from that, using that to develop a very coordinated and strategic investment policy that helps bridge the valley of gap that Mr. Warner mentioned earlier today. We have a lot of investment that's happening in biomanufacturing with Eli Lilly across the country, and that's phenomenal to see, but we also need those types of facilities that others can access as well, particularly the small businesses. And so that takes a lot of coordination and very targeted investment. And right now there is just a gap in the ability to secure funds to do that, to be able to have companies scaling up here in the States. And so I think it's first just identifying where are the specific gaps, how can we all work together to make sure that we're using all the resources we have, and then how can we fill those gaps to make sure that we can do everything here domestically and keep companies here.
So I'll ask you for a little more precision about the type of infrastructure we need to invest in. Is this infrastructure to serve the small group of entrepreneurs or the single entrepreneur that has a great idea and they want to ultimately turn this into a product and they need shared infrastructure they can visit and develop that idea further, or are you referring to other types of infrastructure?
I think it's one scale higher than that. The shared infrastructure just to test out directly out of the lab largely exists in Indiana and across the country. It's fairly untapped, and it's not well inventoried again, but that exists. I think it's getting to that next scale before you're making these bigger batches of product to where that's where it's a challenge, is to get those intermediary scales. And that's when companies are going overseas because it's available. Companies are willing to take these small batches and scale them up there and provide a lot of support. And so then, as Mr. Warner described, then everything goes over there. But it's that in-between scale that we just don't have a lot of opportunity for. The business model is hard for it, for a private firm to take that on.
So unpack for me and members of the public how this works. As you're headed into that next stage where you require some scaling infrastructure and presumably expertise, is the innovator who already has developed their concept to that point, figured out they have something, which if they were able to produce it at scale could become a very useful product to others. Is it accurate that they require not only the infrastructure, but a fairly high level of biomanufacturing expertise, which the reason I ask this is if you saw my interaction with Mr. Warner earlier, this is something that he and I sort of went back and forth and emphasized. It's not just the hard infrastructure. It's hard to manufacture at scale and with fidelity living things, new living things. So if anyone, Ms. Dennis, and then if anyone else wants to speak to this.
Yeah, the expertise is critical. So when you're taking your product into a manufacturing environment to have them produce it for you, it's a very integrated partnership to where they are using their scientists and engineers to help formulate and scale the product with you collaboratively. That takes a lot of resources. And so at the moment, when companies do go overseas to do that, they're being handed free postdocs and free expertise, essentially, to help them do that and guide them through that process. That model is hard to replicate over here. And so it's both. It's not just having the bioreactors that have capacity that you can use. It's having that expertise as well. And so there's a lot to it.
Yeah, I would reiterate what Ms. Dennis shared. And I think it's, Eli Lilly, I think, is kind of vertically integrating themselves. I think they were tired of trying to wait for capacity amongst their contract manufacturing partners for that early in human study material. And so they are investing for themselves to develop that capability up in Lebanon at the LEAP district. But there are a lot of other companies that don't have that capability to kind of vertically integrate that capability within their four walls of their organization. So to speak to, really speaks to the need that Ms. Dennis is referring to, is that that first in human dose of trial material. It's hard to get existing CDMOs to pay attention to those smaller batches because they've got such demand coming from bigger customers and bigger batches that makes it kind of for them financially unattractive to divert their capacity for these smaller production levels.
Let me zoom out and think about the national value proposition to developing this capacity, more of this capacity here in the United States, potentially in a state like Indiana. Supply chain resiliency, would that be one of the value propositions to avoid interruptions in supply chain? Quality control, is this another area? In my discussions with Eli Lilly, I think is that accurate, Mr. Wong?
Yeah, certainly quality control is important. And then I think it was alluded to earlier by Mr. Warner, is just the process development capabilities and technologies, the know-how. When you take things, overseas, then you're inherently feeding into their flywheel of knowledge and innovation. Whereas, if we can keep that innovation and know-how here domestically, I think would serve us well.
Which is the last area that I discern here, which is intellectual property, to be more pointed about it. There's a risk if you're sending over and not fully developed product to another country, that they reverse engineer the secret sauce and beat you to the market in certain areas. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. And it's also intellectual property, whether it be patentable or not, just in terms of how the process chemistry of how do you translate a molecule into a manufacturable product. And so, that know-how is very valuable and should be cultivated and nurtured and invested here domestically.
Thank you. So the remaining questions I'm going to have will be addressed to all of you. On this next one, I'll start with Mr. Rosenberg and move down the line. And in your view, Mr. Rosenberg, what's the single most important action Congress can take in the next year to ensure the United States remains the global leader in biotech innovation?
Yes, so I think the first two were addressed well in the first panel, and that's sustain and expand SBIR and STTR. These programs work, and we hear constantly from startups leaning into them, and the ROI can be tremendous. The second is the speed and clarity to the regulatory pathways, especially with the new AI-enabled medical technologies that are being developed on a daily basis. The third, I think, is investing in the university industry infrastructure, as we've seen at IU Lab. Thanks to your leadership with the National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology, IU has been a first mover in that front, where we launched grants to 8 multidisciplinary teams within the university to align with the national priorities that came out of your commission. And so we are ready when that funding moves forward to be able to act, because we've done the pre-work and we want to be supportive of that. The second is, with IU Inc., which was adopted by the IU Board of Trustees in February. It is a 501c3 that will sit outside of the university to allow that nimbleness and new infrastructure and financial structures with companies to be able to go after federal grants through a consortia, a university industry consortia. More opportunities aligned with that to take innovation into the industry and continue to evolve the innovation and commercialization opportunities, I think would be very, very welcome. And then last is continuing to build the workforce. The federal investment in stackable credentials and industry-linked opportunities will be critical to retain that talent, not only in states like Indiana, but also the workforce for the United States.
Thank you. Mr. Wong?
I think additional support that the federal government could play, I think it was also alluded to in prior panels, was really creation of really facilities for pilot scale demonstration of technology. I think there's really been a discussion of two different phenotypes here. One is R&D for manufacturing, and then manufacturing for R&D. I think there's need for both, investments in both areas. Catalyze Indiana is really focused on the R&D for manufacturing. And so we want to develop beyond creating this investment fund to attract researchers to Indiana. We also want to develop a network of really proving grounds or sandboxes for the innovations that will come out from these researchers to be able to demonstrate those technologies before they go into a full GMP environment. And so I think this is an area where the federal and state government can also invest. We've already got commitments from philanthropy and industry to be investing in this initiative. I think having government support as well to supercharge those efforts would be highly beneficial. And then, I think Ms. Dennis talked about this early as well, is just the need for R&D, manufacturing for R&D, which is that capacity for smaller scale manufacturing for early stage clinical study material. Again, that gets crowded out at the CDMO level and really makes startups go overseas to China or India to make that early clinical trial material that should be, again, manufactured here domestically.
Ms. Dennis, what comes to mind? What can Congress do in the next year to stay on top as it relates to biotech?
Yeah, I mean, I would support everything that has been mentioned. And then in addition, there has been amazing investment in all of these regional hubs, and we're developing a lot of really great programs that are benefiting our regions. I think that the next step then is to say, what can we pull out of those and then share and have a real collaborative network and then incentivize the use of those best practices. So for example, we have all the bio-related tech hubs that are collaborating informally and helping to avoid redundancies so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel to develop workforce programs and commercialization best practices. It would be great for that to be formalized at the federal level to where these best practices are somewhat codified, and then regions are incentivized and supported to implement those best practices in their regions so that we can just accelerate progress much more quickly.
Would love to work with you and other stakeholders on that. And I should add, there's a real opportunity here for Farm Country USA because what goes in these oftentimes steel tanks to grow new products is agriculture, feedstocks. So we could take high value added, what currently would oftentimes be regarded as ag waste products, put them in tanks, provide an extra stream of revenue for our farmers, and then have high paid, high skilled biomanufacturing jobs across rural America. It's energy efficient to produce near where things are consumed. Think of all the value propositions, and Indiana is well situated to kind of lead the way on a lot of this. I would ask, Mr. Rosenberg indicated that among the things we really need to be focused on is workforce. Of course, Indiana University doing as good a work as anyone to prepare our workforce to offer the sort of value we've talked about today. But Mr. Wong, Ms. Dennis, as it relates to workforce, at what stage or experience levels are there the most significant workforce gaps when it comes to biotech or chemistry, if you prefer? And what role should federal policy play in building a stronger, more scalable biotech workforce pipeline?
The approach that we're trying to take here in Indiana, Senator, is really focused on attacking it by kind of demographic group by demographic group. We've got K through 12 initiatives. We've got initiatives that target college graduates, and then also working adults that are already in the workforce, but maybe not in our industry. And so we're trying to meet people where they are and create pathways for them to get meaningful and rewarding career pathways into our industry. On the K through 12 side, and I'll let Ms. Dennis talk about kind of the college graduate efforts that her organization is leading, but on the K through 12 side, really as a state, we're importing a Swiss-based apprenticeships model that is also found in Germany and Austria and other Northern European countries to good effect, and really give meaningful experience-based, work-based learning experiences starting in sophomore, junior year in high school. I think we often undersell what high school students can do and learn at the workplace and the value of experiential learning. We're trying to change and fundamentally really reinvent education in that respect. And so we're creating apprenticeship programs starting in sophomore year, focused initially on biomanufacturing jobs, and hope that that will inspire the next generation of people to really get rewarding occupations and pathways in our industry, and to really then support the growth that our industry has here in Indiana.
I'll turn to Ms. Dennis, and then I'll go back to Mr. Rosenberg, because I know he did some important work in this space in his previous capacity.
So yeah, the workforce piece is critical, especially when you're looking at the manufacturing side of the pipeline. One of our biggest needs is really just at lab techs and operators, so those that are on the floor being able to make the product. And that speaks to supply chain, and it speaks to the success of trying to get those investments happening here in the U.S. And so in terms of the support that the federal government can play, obviously it's funding. It takes a lot of work to be able to have facilities available to train workers to get them out onto the floor as quickly as possible. But again, it's also that coordination that the federal government can help with as well. The amount of time that we have spent, and BioCrossroads led most of this, of just trying to understand what skills and abilities companies needed for these workers. So then we could develop curriculum that gave them those KSAs as quickly as possible to get them onto the floor. That took a lot of work, and I know all of our other sister regions are doing the exact same process, reinventing that wheel, talking to their industries when the competencies are pretty much shared. And so coordinating that type of data sharing and those, again, types of best practices can help us develop a national workforce much more quickly. And I think Indiana has a very strong model that can be shareable and replicable that we're working to develop here.
Can our statewide community college system, Ivy Tech Community College, be a force multiplier as it relates to some of the technician level jobs? Because I would imagine not all these jobs require a bachelor's degree, certainly not a postdoctorate degree.
Absolutely. So they are a key partner that we work with.
It's what we call a leading question in the business.
Yes. They, yeah, and especially because they are statewide. We're very lucky that we have a statewide system so that you can rapidly expand programs. And so most of these positions don't even really require a certificate. We're developing curriculum in partnership with Purdue and Ivy Tech that is 6 to 8 weeks, and then people are on the floor. And so those educational partners are key to be able to get those deployed quickly. It's
fantastic. And as far as I understand it, Purdue and Ivy Tech have partnered, as has IU. Partnered with the local Ivy Tech branch in some different discrete areas. Mr. Rosenberg.
Thank you, Senator Young. With my previous hat as Secretary of Commerce, the university is doing an incredible job of bringing in talent. I think, per capita during the school year, Indiana has some of the most, one of the highest per capita of knowledge and learners in the entire country, thanks to our university system. Our goal at the state was really how do we keep them here, and we do that by 2 ways, is having those interesting industries of the future and jobs, not only jobs, but careers that those, learners could see themselves in long term. And how do we create that stickiness at an early age so that when they graduate, they already have the connections into industry and they want to plant their flag here. And then second is how do we develop the communities in which they want to live. So many graduates now go to a place where they want to live and find a job there instead of, historically it was find a job and that's where you live. And so we need to create the community, the environment, the built ecosystem for where those learners want to live. At IU currently, we're doing that in a couple ways, but one of those big ways is leaning into artificial intelligence. So many of the startups that we see coming through our incubator now are in that AI space, whether from drug discovery or genome sequencing, sensors, quality control, or organoids on a chip, which I cannot expand upon beyond that. But IU has launched its Gen AI 101 and Gen AI 201 courses It's open to all IU students, faculty, alumni, and now we're piloting it with Indiana businesses. That baseline knowledge of artificial intelligence and how you use it on a day-to-day basis is no longer optional. It's a requirement for so many businesses that are leaning in that way. We've had over 120,000 students, faculty, and alumni enroll in that, and we'll continue to grow that in partnership with our industry partners, again, so that when students graduate, they have those connections and they can contribute to those businesses on day one.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And that, in my observation and experience, that's the handoff from your universities to the labor market has been an area that has required a lot of work. And I know that President Whitten is really emphasizing the importance of that. So one more question for the full panel today. As small biotech companies grow, many face challenges navigating partnerships with larger firms, investors, and federal agencies. What can be done to ensure, and we'll start with Ms. Dennis, what can be done to ensure that small businesses are able to compete fairly, retain their innovations, and successfully scale without being crowded out?
I think it's important that they've received the support that they need to be able to do that. It is complicated, and most of the startups, they're technical experts. And so the programs that BioCrossroads and IU Lab are implementing and that we're helping to support to be able to create basically wraparound services around these companies to help them rapidly get through the regulatory environment, to help them have conversations with investors that are actually successful, so that they're not having to do everything on their own while also being experts in the science. And again, I think it speaks to the collaborative nature that we have here in Indiana, to where there could be one company that all three of our organizations are working to help support. And we all play a piece in that, and I think that that's critical to helping get them out of that space and be able to be successful.
Thank you. Mr. Wong?
Maybe I'll pivot to wearing my hat as an investor at the seed stage, but also my prior experience helping lead a startup developing cancer prevention a platform leveraging RNA technology. I think it was alluded to in a prior panel, just talking about all the number of regulatory agencies. So I think it's great to develop a therapy, but also if you develop something that helps prevent a disease, like a cancer screening test, for example, you not only have to deal with the FDA, you also have to deal with the CMS, the Medicare and Medicaid services. But then even after you get FDA approval, even after you get covered from CMS, you will not get covered by private insurance unless you've been really put on that good housekeeping seal approval by the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, USPSTF, which is a small little agency under HHS. Unfortunately, the USPSTF only reviews as a category every 6 to 7 years. So technology advances much faster than 6 or 7 years. And so if you're on the outside of that review cycle, you could be sitting on the sideline.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Not because it's unimportant, but because it's important. Should that be once every 5 years? Should it be twice a year? Or is there a reason why they have once every 6 or 7 years?
I think largely it's a function of the fact that the panel members on the USPSTF review board are volunteers. And so they only have a certain finite capacity to review all the different categories. I think they've got 40 categories of different preventative types of products that they review. And so it's just like a cycle.
Okay.
And it's very bureaucratic. Should be every 3 years, I think.
Should they be?
Yeah.
Oh, it should be once every few years?
Every 3 years, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't expect you to know the answer to this, but could this be solved through asking more people to volunteer?
It could be expansion of the panel and create subspecialties of the panel. Right now, it's one large panel reviewing all categories without subcommittees.
Is it possible in this age of AI that we can make volunteering less painful and more efficient?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I would I would suggest that if a product has been FDA approved, if a product has gotten CMS coverage, that there shouldn't be an additional approval by USPSTF. USPSTF should give up their discretion to, if you've got FDA and CMS coverage, that should give you USPSTF approval.
Might we consider a shot clock? And if the proverbial ball is not released, that is, decisions not made by USPSTF, then it's automatically approved?
Definitely should have some kind of time limit. Right now, there is no time limit.
But it sounded like what you were proposing could be a little more revolutionary. I won't repeat it lest it be quoted, but eliminating that final line of defense with USPSTF altogether is a possibility. I see Mr. Rosenberg is chomping at the bit, so is that accurate, sir? Did you want to speak to this particular issue? Okay.
I'm going to try to be less...
It's like being in all right, it's like you're at an auction. You raised your hand.
I want to be less revolutionary than Mr. Wong. So,
okay,
yeah.
Yes, please, Mr. Rose. Thank you, Mr. Wong.
Yes. The advice for startups is engage in the ecosystem. That is the Hoosier secret sauce. Very few, if any, can do what we can do here in Central Indiana with the partners that we have, the mentorship that we have, universities being a partner, leaders like BioCrossroads and AOI with Heartland Bioworks, largest medical school in the country, and leadership across the board in manufacturing. So there are very few other ecosystems, but the startups themselves have to lean in, get involved, figure out what the network is, and they'll find the help.
Thank you. Mr. Wong, we can follow up on that other matter because we're coming to the very end. And I want to thank our witnesses on this second panel, but also on the earlier panel for being here today. I want to thank all of the concerned citizens, members of the press, and others. Of course, I want to thank staff. I want to thank our Small Business Committee staff that does a wonderful job in Washington, but really around the country. I think Senate staff is oftentimes not mentioned enough. I know all of you think that I'm a master of the universe. I do all this by myself, but I get a great deal of assistance. And Lucy Sadler here on my personal staff, I should mention her, our communications team. We have law enforcement here. All right, I've acknowledged, I think, everyone in the room except for the city of Carmel, and I want to thank the mayor for making this space available. I ask unanimous consent that the record of today's hearing remain open for 2 weeks for members to submit questions, revise and extend their remarks, and submit additional information into the record without objection so ordered. With that, the Committee on Small Business and Entrepreneurship stands adjourned.